Casey, welcome. Oh, where's Casey's face? There she is. Oh my gosh. It is my greatest pleasure, truly. Casey's a dear sister and a friend of mine. I'm going to try to cry less than 300 times tonight. So it is my greatest pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Casey Baker. Casey is devoted to helping women find their internal safety and freedom to share their voices authentically and from their heart on big stages and in the most intimate conversations of their lives. She is the founder of an international women's public speaking and thought leadership organization, WomanSpeak, and teaches Velvet Flow, which is a feminine spiritual practice that incorporates sensual movement and feminine qigong. Today, she will talk with us about the one magical ingredient that is truly the most important thing women on a mission need to feel free, need to free their voices and expand into their leadership and success. It's not what the masculine model of leadership tells us that we need, but it is at the heart of what feminine leadership truly means and entails. I'm excited to welcome my colleague, my sister, and my dear friend to the stage. Welcome, Casey.
Thank you.
I'm so happy.
Oh, everybody. Wow. What an honor to be here for the birthing of this supernova. I am so touched that you invited me to come and speak. Gathering with women who have deep dreams and have a collective shared commitment to creating the more beautiful future that we know is possible in our hearts. This is the conversation and the environment that I love so much. And I know that in this room, we all are holding such an important, crucial, necessary ingredient for this great evolution that's happening at this time in humanity, that all of our gifts are so deeply important and our desires are so sacred. And so I honor every single one of us in that which inside of you, you're holding, that you feel so deeply called to bring forward. And I know that we may be all in different spaces where we are. Some of us may be just emerging with that mission that's been burning a hole in your heart. Some of us have already been in this dance for a long time, but that there's new layers of growth and change and evolution that are coming about. And so I want to speak today to this process of emergence, whether it's an emergence for the first time or an expansion, but an emergence of a new identity or a new way that you're going about and expressing. Because in my experience, it can be absolutely terrifying. This can require everything that we've got. And in my experience, there were things that when I was first emerging with my deep mission in my soul and my voice, that I tried to make it happen, right? I was doing all the spiritual work. I was going to the retreats. I was meeting with the therapist. I was doing the past life regression. I was pulling cards. I was doing all the things, but it wasn't until something truly magical came into my life that I found the grace and the spaciousness and the power within myself to really make that emergence and come through. And so that's what I want to talk about today, and what it is for all of us, because it's not what we're taught. It's not what we're taught. So let me take you back a little bit in my story. I'll take you back to 2009. In 2009, I had been back in the United States. I was living in California after traveling for like many years around the world after I left my investment banking job. And I ended up in San Francisco with such a deep burning need to share the beauty inside me that I felt, the wisdom and the insights and the stories and the depth of service. I was writing poetry like a mad woman. And I was living so deep in this beauty, but I was keeping it all so hidden. I shared it with nobody. I wanted more than anything to share these parts of myself, but I was filled with so much deep fear of rejection. I was filled with so much incredible self-doubt. Like, what if I share some of what feels so beautiful inside of me with people and they don't think it's beautiful? What if it's not valuable? What if this treasure of this voice and this knowing and this wisdom and this vision inside of me falls completely flat and I fail so horribly in front of everyone? The fear of that humiliation was so incredible. And I'm seeing some messages here, and I would love to know, like, can you relate? Does this sound familiar? Thank you, Laurel and Victoria and Melissa, for sharing. Yeah, I would love to hear from anyone. Like, do you experience this? Is this part of the inner conversation and the struggle now, or that you've experienced in the past? It's, yeah, this is like the collective angst, right? I don't think this is unique to women. I think this is a human thing. But for women, there is conditioning around us and growing up and living in a patriarchal culture that makes this emergent more difficult. And I think a lot of us know all the reasons and, a lot of the reasons why around that. I'm not going to get so much into that. But what I thought was that I had to do this myself, right? And there was no amount of sitting alone in my room or by myself on a field by the ocean north of San Francisco that was changing my experience from being alone with all of this wisdom and vision inside of me to actually experiencing life where that was manifest. That was what was happening. So in that fall of 2009, I was one night driving my car, and all of a sudden I felt this thundering energy start flowing through my body. And I pulled over the car and I grabbed my phone and I opened the notes feature, and it just thundered through me this poem. But it wasn't like any poem I'd ever written. It was this wild, bold call to action for women to own the fullness of their sensual life force energy and rise up in their voices, and that the planet was calling for us. It was so outrageous, the energy in it, and that I fell in love with this thing that I had just written, and I carried it like that treasure, right, tucked in my heart, in my notes folder in my phone. And then one night, about a month and a half later, this girl that I had been in a women's circle with, that we had connected, came over for dinner. It was our first time to hang out alone. And she had just gone to see Avatar. It had just come out. I had not yet seen it. She arrives at my house. She'd been bawling. Her heart was just so open. And we just fell so deep into the space of just shared deep intimacy, love, and reverence for our shared love for the earth and for women. And I found myself that night asking her, I have something that I wrote that would you, I mean, it was so hard for me to ask. It's like, can I share it with you? And she was like, yes. And I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. And she sat on my couch, and I stood in the living room in front of her with my little phone, hands shaking. And I opened my mouth, and something came through me. And it was like this force that just showed up for me in sharing this poem. And it was like I gave it and I spoke it to her with my whole heart. And at the end, my whole body was vibrating and shaking, and she was sobbing. And she got up and she hugged me and she said, every woman needs to hear this. Every woman needs to hear this. And then the following weekend, she actually gathered like 9 women in a living room and had me come and share this piece. And I stood in front of these women. This time I had it printed out on paper, and I was still shaking, but I was beginning to learn, like, to use, because I had been studying tantric practices and energy cultivation practices for years. And I was using what I knew to help me really ground, create safety, feel embodied, even in it feeling so intense. And I shared this piece with these women, and like they jumped up. 2 of them came and just attacked me in hugs. Women were crying. They were like, every woman needs to hear this. And then a week later, in someone else's living room, they had gathered like 30 women And I shared it. This time I had it memorized. And this time I shared it and they were roaring. I mean, it was so incredible. This experience, it was unlike anything I had ever experienced in my life. And then only a few months later, I started becoming more bold because I had these women around me who were providing something so essential for me that I was taking bold action. I was terrified, but I was taking creative risk and making bold moves. And I asked this man who owned one of the hottest nightclubs in San Francisco. It was called the Supper Club. It was like all these beds and this like huge projection screen. I asked him, I shared with him my vision and my stand that I wanted to throw a party for the planet. And it was going to be a sexy party. And it was going to be in reverence to the planet. And would he give me his nightclub on a Saturday night? And he did. He gave me the nightclub. He donated it to me. And with the working with all these women, we filled it to over 400 people. Max capacity was 300 people in that space. So I had gathered all these women and we created this like sexy dance number and this whole thing. We were doing this whole dance number, this like image of the planet behind us projected on this screen. And all of a sudden, they all melted down to the ground at the end of the song. And I stood up with my microphone, feeling so much fucking intensity in my body. I didn't know if I was going to make it out alive. And I shared this spoken word piece with the fullness of my heart, and everybody went crazy. It was like the most amazing experience. It's one of those things that I can tell, like when I die, I think I'll flash on that, right? It was such an amazing experience. And then from there, it was like a train that took off and just kept going for 13 years of my work serving women and emerging with their voices, their speaking, their leadership, their messages. And I ended up building this organization around the world called Woman Speak. And when I reflect so much on what it took, and it really was the gift that these women provided for me, and that I have now been devoted to helping to create circles around the world in the form of these Woman Speak circles to provide the same gift for each other, which is this particular quality of listening. It is called what I call fertile listening. And it's listening for a woman in such a way that she cannot help but blossom in your presence. And it is such a gift. You know, there's so much attention in our culture in leadership and, you know, success and all this on speaking up. And that is so important. And it is a soul need to share our voice. But what is so often misunderstood and overlooked, it is one of the great superpowers, is how we listen for one another. And I know Melissa mentioned that before. And I want to talk about this a little more deeply, because in my experience, it is this listening. It is this quality of generous, generative listening that is so present and so seeks to find what is brilliant about what is happening in front of you, what is being said, that is what pulls out from someone and from a woman in this circumstance, in this community, the depths of her brilliance and her wisdom. We don't need so much all the strategies and all the, you know, working harder. When we insert this ingredient, this environment into our lives, that's where the magic happens. That is where the grace happens. That is where the depth of the power to move through and for the soul to truly emerge comes from. You know, and the thing is that it's not some like pie in the sky, like, you know, unrealistic sense that we're never going to compare each other, because that is so ingrained in our conditioning to compare ourselves. Competition, that is the hallmark of the patriarchy, and how it affects women is the scarcity, right? That the belief inside that if she is shining, something must be wrong with me, right? Like there's only a finite amount of space in this universe for us all to be a supernova, right? That is just not true. but our minds are so conditioned to be in competition with one another to access resource protection and safety. And so one of the great things that we are doing at this time in humanity is healing this insanity, healing this deep, deep confusion. It is so deeply the thing that is going to set up our daughters and their daughters and their daughters to have and come in with a mindset that is already generative and rested in the fundamental abundance that is our life, and that is in which our gifts come from. So the thing that is, I find, is really important to understand about this is that there are times when we are going to look at someone and some woman and compare ourselves for better or for worse, where we will make ourselves inferior or superior. And when we can just get real about that and undo the labor of like shame or hiding about that, it allows us then to be at choice, to notice when that happens, to notice, and then to arrive to that moment with a deeper devotion, which is to really listen for the brilliance of the woman in front of us. And when we transform how we listen for other women, by nature, what it does is we transform how we listen for ourselves. And I think this is one of the big learnings that I have been so deeply in the last 2 years, is really getting on like a whole other level, that how I listen for myself and how I talk to myself is everything, right? It is absolutely either our prison or our absolute freedom and liberation, is that inner conversation. But sometimes we can't access those things until we see it mirrored in front of us in relationship. And so being in community is critical for our liberation, is critical for rewiring our minds and doing the deep healing work to support our soul and being free to do the thing that it came here to do. It is also the thing, being in community, that is fertile listening, that is really supports us, that sees us and celebrates us in taking creative risk, that we find the thing that maybe we didn't realize that we needed, but to finally feel more safe in our lives. I don't know if any of you do. I have struggled with just dealing with feelings of inner unsafety a lot in my life. It has been one of the big themes. And so finding internal safety has been my devotion and commitment to people. But when we have community in our life, a community that truly helps to listen for our greatness, and we're providing that in turn, there is a deep relaxing that starts to happen within. We don't feel alone. And even if sometimes we have community, but it's laden with gossip or this kind of low quality listening, not really celebratory, we can be in community, but we still kind of feel alone. So fertile listening is something that provides for us also this deep feeling like, oh, I feel more safe and free, and we have more energy, life force energy, to bring forward the incredible work that we're here to bring. So this is something that I have had to, over the years, realize that not only was this important for me in emerging with my work, but about 4 years ago, or maybe a little longer, I moved from San Francisco, where I had this kind of listening in my life, as I was helping others have this kind of listening in my business. I moved to another town and I met wonderful people, but I did not have that quality of listening around me. And it was very hard. I started to struggle so much more with self-doubt and hiding and feeling imposter syndrome and all the things. And finally, I realized, oh my God, right, I don't have that kind of community around me right now. I have to go and find that. I knew enough to know that I needed to actively seek it out. And I'm so glad that I did, because it's made all the difference, right? For me to go and actually have to choose to invest in finding that community. And so when I did, it was like, oh my gosh, I accessed and I found the thing that it was like, oh, this was the thing that comes online when I bring that kind of community and listening back into my life. And what it is my power. And that's true for all of us, because we as women do not rise in our power alone. We rise together. And having community that listens for you so deeply, that is committed to seeing you and celebrating you and being a stand for you, it is the magical elixir that will take all of the effort and bring so much more grace into the process. That is the environment which we bloom. And so my ask for you is to really look in your life and see, do you have the environment that you need to fully do justice to the gifts and the sacred work that is inside of you? And if not, I want to really be a stand for you to find that in your life, to be a stand for you to surround yourself with that kind of listening and provide it. Because in my experience, it makes all the difference in the world, and it makes it all so much more fun. So thank you so much for inviting me to come and speak here at the launch of this amazing community, which is embodying and being a stand for this very kind of environment for us all to bloom. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so proud to be a Nova, and I'm so happy to be with all of you.
Can we all please give Casey a huge round of applause?
Thank
Yes. Soak it in. What a difference you make.
Beautiful.
you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.